The first time I met my son's new wife, she looked at me the way someone looks at a stranger standing in their parking spot. Polite on the surface, irritated underneath. I felt it immediately, like a cold breeze brushing past my chest. I tried to ignore it. After everything I had sacrificed raising my son alone, I wanted peace. I wanted to believe he had married someone who would love our family, not divide it. But from the moment I stepped inside their house that afternoon, I noticed it. My son was walking carefully, speaking gently, choosing every word as if he was afraid something might explode. And she watched me, studied me, as if I was an intruder in a home I didn't belong to. I brought a casserole, hoping it would soften the atmosphere. "Thank you," she said, but her eyes never touched the dish. Instead, she scanned the living room and quietly started rearranging things I hadn't even touched, as if my presence alone had already made the house untidy. My son tried to talk, tried to laugh, but she kept interrupting him with small corrections. "Babe, sit properly. Babe, don't tell that story. Babe, your mom doesn't need to know that." I kept pretending not to notice, but my heart was sinking deeper and deeper. Something was wrong. Eventually, she cleared her throat and looked directly at me. "Calm. Too calm. So, I'm sure you're tired," she said. "Maybe it's better if you head home. We're trying to keep the house quiet. I don't really like too many people around." Too many people. He meant me. My son froze. His eyes widened in panic, but he didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't object. He just looked down at his hands as if silence was the safest thing he could offer her. And in that moment, something sharp twisted inside my chest. A realization. My son wasn't just being polite. He wasn't just trying to keep the peace. He was afraid. Afraid of his own wife. I stood up slowly, forcing my voice to remain soft. "All right," I said. "If that's what you want." She nodded, satisfied, as if she had finally placed everything the way she wanted it. But as I walked toward the door, something inside me shifted. A line was drawn. A softness evaporated. A mother's heart is gentle, but when pushed too far, it becomes something much stronger and much wiser. If she didn't want me close, I wouldn't fight her. But I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving observant, calm, and quietly preparing for something she didn't see coming. Because when a woman believes she has successfully pushed you out, that's exactly when she stops watching you. And that's when you learn the truth she never wanted you to see. The night after she asked me to leave, I lay awake staring at my ceiling, replaying every second of that cold, forced smile on her face. The way my son shrank into himself. The way she dismissed me as if I were some nuisance drifting into their home like unwanted dust. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, that maybe she was just nervous or trying too hard to control her new environment. But then I remembered the look in my son's eyes, fear disguised as neutrality, and my heart tightened. The next morning, I decided I would not mention what happened. I would not complain, confront, or accuse. Instead, I kept my distance and simply checked on my son through small messages. Short replies. Delayed responses. Voice notes that sounded rushed and carefully measured, as if someone else was listening in the background. Days passed like that, quiet, uneasy, heavy. Then one afternoon he sent me a text that made my stomach drop. "Mom, I'll come by soon. Things are just complicated." Complicated. That word has destroyed more families than arguments ever have. I didn't push. I simply said, "I'm here." But inside me the quiet storm was growing. A mother knows when something is wrong, even when her child refuses to give it voice. And something was terribly wrong. A week later, I saw a missed call from my neighbor, the kind of woman who notices everything happening on the street. When I called her back, she lowered her voice immediately. She told me she'd seen my son early that morning, standing outside my gate, hands in his pockets, staring at the house. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He just stood there for a few minutes, and then left. My heart cracked open. Why didn't he come in? Why didn't he call me? What was stopping him? That evening, I decided I would try again. I made a small pot of soup, the kind he loved growing up, and went to their house. When I knocked, it took a long time before anyone opened the door. And when she finally did, she stood there blocking the entrance, her hand gripping the frame like she was guarding something. Or someone. Her eyes widened in irritation before she masked it with a tight smile that didn't reach her cheeks. I said softly that I came to check on my son. She said he was busy. I asked if I could give him the soup. She said, "We already ate." I asked if I could say hello. she said. He's sleeping. Every answer came too quickly. Too rigid. Too planned. Something didn't feel right. Before I could say anything else, she stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door slightly behind her so I couldn't see inside. Then she said the words that made the hair on my arms rise. Please stop coming unannounced. It makes things uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. As if I was disrupting some delicate balance she had created. I looked her in the eyes and saw it. Ownership. Control. Territory. She wasn't protecting my son from me. She was protecting her power over him. I turned and left, but when I reached my car I glanced back. She was still on the porch, watching me drive away. And the way she stared, unblinking, expressionless, told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't threatened by me. She believed she had already won. But control built on fear is fragile. It cracks at the slightest truth. And the truth was coming. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But a woman who watches that closely is hiding something bigger than attitude. And whatever it was, I was going to find it. I woke up the next morning feeling like someone had placed a stone on my chest. The kind that presses down slowly until breathing feels like work. The kind that mothers carry when their children drift toward a kind of darkness they cannot name yet. I moved through the house quietly, touching the back of the sofa he used to sleep on when he came home late from school, touching the kitchen counter where I used to pack his food, touching the hallway wall where his handprint from childhood was still faintly visible. Everything in the house whispered him, but the silence around him was growing louder every day. Children don't just pull away from their mothers for no reason. Something or someone pushes them. And the more I replayed that moment when she stood on the porch blocking the door, insisting he was asleep in the middle of the day, the more that voice inside me, the one that has guided mothers for centuries, kept saying, something is deeply wrong. I tried to distract myself that morning by cleaning, sorting clothes, wiping shelves that didn't need wiping. But my mind returned to him like a compass returns to north. Around noon I received a message from an unknown number. It was a picture. A blurry one. My son, walking alone on a street. Shoulders hunched. Head down. Hands in his pockets. The message below said, your son needs you but he can't speak. My heart dropped so fast it felt like the ground shifted. I called the number immediately. Switched off. I called again. Switched off. It felt like someone had thrown me into a maze, dark, confusing, full of echoes but no answers. For the rest of the day my mind spun circles around itself. Why would someone send me that? Who was watching him? Why couldn't he speak? The fear tasted metallic in my mouth. I sat down and tried to think clearly. If he couldn't speak to me, then he wasn't allowed to. If he wasn't allowed to, then someone was controlling him. Someone was controlling him, it was her. And if she was doing that, then what was happening inside that marriage was far worse than rudeness at a doorway. That evening I decided to drive past their house. I wasn't going to knock. I just needed to see for myself if he was okay. When I reached the street, their living room lights were on. I parked far enough to not be noticeable but close enough to observe. After a few minutes I saw movement. Her. She passed by the window holding something in her hand, a phone. Then she turned sharply as if reacting to someone behind her. Then she moved out of view. A few seconds later I saw him. My son. He walked into view slowly, shoulders curved inward like a man carrying invisible weight. He opened his mouth as if he was speaking, then paused as if choosing words carefully, then lowered his head again. She walked back into view, standing right in front of him. Her posture rigid. Commanding. He nodded to whatever she said. Fast, fearful nod. Not agreement. Compliance. My stomach tightened. This wasn't marriage. This was control. And he was shrinking right in front of my eyes. I stayed there for almost 30 minutes until the curtains were drawn shut sharply. By her. Not him. As I drove home, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. I kept picturing him standing there looking like a shadow of himself. A boy I raised with love, now moving through life like he didn't own his voice anymore. When I reached home, I sat in the dark, letting the weight of everything settle inside me. That's when I made the decision. I was going to step back. But not in the way she expected. I wasn't going to cry in corners or beg for scraps of access to my son. I wasn't going to fight her with shouting or accusations. That would only strengthen her hold on him. I was going to do what mothers do when storms threaten their children. Watch quietly, gather truth silently, and strike only when the truth is undeniable. Because control like hers always leaves cracks. You just have to wait long enough to see where the light escapes. 3 days later, one of those cracks appeared. I received a call from my son's childhood friend, someone who used to practically live in my house. He said he had bumped into my son earlier that day and something about him felt off. Not physically, emotionally. He said my son spoke in a careful, measured tone, like someone was monitoring his words inside his own mind. He said when he asked how marriage was going, my son's eyes glassed over before he forced a smile. Then he said something that crawled under my skin and stayed there. He said my son kept repeating the words "I'm fine," but his voice didn't match his face. That phrase haunted me, because pretend strength is often the loudest cry for help. After the call, I went into my son's old room. I sat on his bed, inhaled the faint scent of old books and forgotten shirts, and for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not soft tears. Deep, quiet, grieving tears. Tears mothers shed when they know something is happening to their child but cannot reach them. After the tears dried, clarity came. If my son couldn't come to me, I would go to him. But not physically. Emotionally. Strategically. Gently. I started sending small messages. Not questions, not accusations, not pressure. Just reminders of home. A picture of his old drawing he made when he was 8. A short voice note of me laughing at a memory. A message saying I found his old school project. Slowly he began responding with longer texts. Not long enough to reveal anything, but long enough to show he was still in there. Still reachable. Still mine. One night, after I sent him a picture of the silly birthday cake he made at age 10, he replied with something that froze me. I miss myself. Those 3 words told me everything. He was losing himself. And she was taking advantage of that. That night I made up my mind. I wasn't going to rescue him. I was going to remind him how to rescue himself. Because a mother's love doesn't just hold. It awakens. And I could feel something waking inside him already. I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know when the truth about her would finally surface. But I felt it. The shift. The small crack growing wider. The quiet unraveling of whatever facade she was holding together. Something was about to break. And when it did, the entire truth would spill out. In a way none of us expected. I didn't sleep the night he wrote those words. I miss myself. They repeated in my mind with the slow heaviness of a drumbeat, echoing through every memory I had of him, every stage of his childhood, every hope I carried for him when he became a man. I sat on the sofa watching the shadows shift across the walls as the hours passed, feeling a tug inside me. Part fear, part clarity, part the instinct that rises in a mother when she knows her child is trapped in a life that is bleeding him quietly. By morning I made tea but didn't drink it. My mind was running ahead of everything else, scanning possibilities, predicting outcomes, imagining versions of the truth that hadn't surfaced yet. I kept asking myself a question that no mother wants to face. How far had she pushed him to make him feel like he was disappearing inside his own life? I stepped outside to breathe fresh air. The sun was rising slowly, thin and pale, like even it was afraid to shine fully. I looked up at the sky, whispering a quiet prayer for protection over a son who was drifting away from himself. I knew she had tightened her control. I could feel it. A shift like that doesn't happen for no reason. When someone begins to lose themselves, it usually starts with small things. The way they apologize too quickly, the way they watch someone else's mood before speaking, the way their shoulders shrink inward as if trying to hide evidence of their own existence. And I had begun to notice those signs in him long before he admitted anything. That afternoon I tried to distract myself by cooking, something warm, something comforting, something he used to love when he was younger. But every stir of the pot reminded me that I didn't know what he was eating now, whether he was taking care of himself, whether she was feeding him love or feeding him fear. The thoughts began to circle until I had to sit down. I looked around my kitchen as if the walls held answers, and that's when I heard it. My phone buzzing on the table. My heart jumped before I even reached for it. It was him. He sent a voice note. Only 4 seconds long. I pressed play immediately, holding my breath without realizing it. At first I heard nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of breathing, tight, shaky, almost like someone trying not to cry. Then one quiet word, barely audible. Just my name. Just that. But in that one word I heard everything. Fear. Exhaustion. A silent request. A breaking point. It was the tone of a man calling for help without knowing how to phrase the plea. I listened again. And again. I held the phone to my chest and felt a wave of emotion rise up with such force it almost knocked me back. He was reaching out. But he was afraid. Something had shifted again. Something within him was cracking open, letting light in, letting truth leak out. And I knew, whatever was happening in that house was becoming unbearable. I immediately typed, "Are you okay?" The message showed delivered. Then seen. Then nothing. Minutes passed. Long minutes. Heavy minutes. Minutes where 1,000 fears twisted through my chest like vines. Then finally his reply came. "I can't talk now. He's here." My breath froze. He's here. That sentence alone told me everything. She wasn't just present physically. She was present in his mind. The way a shadow becomes part of your footsteps. The way fear becomes a silent translator of your choices. I felt something rise in me. A protective fury, quiet but powerful, the kind that tightens a mother's spine and makes her heart beat in a different rhythm. I didn't respond again. I didn't want to put him at risk. But the knot in my chest tightened until I had to walk. I grabbed my keys, stepped outside, and began pacing around the compound. Every possible scenario played in my mind, some too dark to entertain for too long. I replayed that voice note over and over as I walked, feeling his pain, his hesitation, his shrinking presence. Then another message buzzed through and my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. "They argued again. Loud. Something about you." My eyes widened. He wasn't writing in full sentences anymore. The fear was pushing through. I asked gently, "Who argued?" He replied instantly. "Her and her mother." A jolt ran through me like electricity. She wasn't acting alone. He had backup. That explained the heightened control, the sudden blocking, the coldness at the door. Something bigger was happening behind the curtain and I had been looking at only the surface. I asked nothing else. I waited. Minutes passed. Then he sent one more message. "They don't want you in my life." Something in me went cold. Not angry. Not shocked. Just cold. Because that type of sentence doesn't come from a young wife trying to form boundaries. It comes from manipulation. From isolation tactics. From insecurity, control, and the need to cut a person off from the people who love them most. I sat on a bench outside the house, the cold air brushing over my face, thinking carefully. If they didn't want me in his life, then the question was why? Why would her mother join in? Why would they unite against me? A woman who had never troubled them, never overstepped, never tried to control anything in their marriage. Whenever people try that hard to remove someone, it's usually because that someone sees what they're trying to hide. And they knew I saw through them. But what exactly were they hiding? That evening I received another picture from the unknown number. This time it was clearer. My son sitting in their living room, head bowed, hands clasped together, looking like a man carrying a world he never asked for. No caption. No context. Just the image of a son trying not to break. My hands shook as I stared at the photo. The thought that someone was watching him, someone inside their circle, someone witnessing things, terrified me and comforted me at the same time. Terrified me because danger was close. Comforted me because someone cared enough to alert me. I tried calling the number. Still switched off. I saved it in my notes with the title, "Whoever you are, thank you." That night, as the house grew quiet, I allowed myself to imagine something I hadn't dared consider before. What if the problem wasn't only her? What if her family had entered his life like a cage disguised as marriage? What if he was being pressured, manipulated, guilt-tripped, controlled, layer by layer, until he no longer recognized himself? I stayed awake thinking about every choice he had made since marrying her. The sudden distance. The careful texting. The way he avoided eye contact when I visited. How he seemed to shrink a little more each time. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through body language, through hesitation, through silence. And my son had been whispering for months. The next morning something strange happened. I was sitting at my dining table when my phone buzzed. It was her. Not a call. A message. "Good afternoon. Hope you're well." I stared at the text for a long minute. The politeness felt fake. Like a curtain hung over a damaged wall. I replied simply, "Yes, thank you." She didn't respond. Not that day. Not the next. But I knew what that message meant. She had sensed the shift. She had sensed that he was reconnecting with me emotionally. Controlling people always feel when their hold begins to slip. A few days later, my son sent a text at 1 a.m. "I need to see you, but you can't know." My heart raced. I replied instantly, "Tell me when and where." A minute later he responded, "I don't know yet, but soon." I didn't sleep after that. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he needed to say so privately that even time and location were dangerous to reveal. That morning I left the house early and sat in the car, staring ahead, lost in thought. And suddenly, like a flash of memory, I saw him as a child again. Running toward me after school, backpack bouncing, smile wide, eyes bright. He used to tell me everything. Every fear. Every joy. Every secret. Somewhere along the path of life, he had stumbled into the arms of someone who was dimming that brightness. Someone who was shrinking the boy I raised into a version of himself I barely recognized. I felt something settle inside me, a decision, quiet but unshakable. I wasn't going to interfere. But I wasn't going to disappear either. She wanted me gone. She wanted me erased. But I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to stay close enough for him to find me the moment he needed to. Close enough for him to breathe freely again. Close enough for the truth, whatever it was, to finally rise to the surface. And I could feel it rising already, like a tide that had been pulled back for too long and was finally gathering strength to crash. Because children eventually return to the people who truly love them. And the way he wrote "I need to see you" told me one thing. The moment of truth was coming. And when it arrived, it would expose everything she had been hiding. The house was too quiet that morning. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heart beating. I sat alone at the edge of the sofa, staring at a folded piece of paper on the table. A list. A list of all the things my son's new wife said I needed to fix if I wanted to be welcomed in their new home. I read the first line again. "You talk too much." I almost laughed. After everything I had survived in this life, after raising a child alone, after burying my pride more times than I can count, someone's daughter had the audacity to tell me I talked too much. But the laughter died quickly, replaced by something that felt like a stone sinking in my chest. Because the truth is, I wasn't angry. I was hurt. Deeply. I had never expected her to love me. I had only hoped she would be kind. But kindness, it seemed, was too expensive to give these days. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and allowed myself to remember that day. The day everything between us finally snapped. It was the dinner I had cooked with my own hands. Food I had bought with my own money. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing the meal because I wanted to welcome her properly. I wanted her to feel like she didn't just marry my son. She married into a family that would hold her like their own. But she walked into my kitchen with her perfect nails, tapping on her phone, and said, "Next time don't cook. Your food is too old school. We don't eat like this." My son looked away, pretending not to hear. That was the first sting. Part 5 is where the wound opened completely. That morning, when I was sitting alone with that list in my hand, I heard a message come into my phone. I ignored it. But the second message came. Then the third. By the fifth ping, something told me to look. It was my neighbor sending me pictures. Pictures of my son and his wife in my house. My house. The house I built alone. The house I raised him in. The house I cried in when life broke me. The house I prayed in when God was the only friend I had. They were in my living room, moving things around, packing some things, throwing others into trash bags without even asking. I froze. Not because of the picture, but because of the caption my neighbor sent. They said they want to make it their weekend place, so they're clearing old things out. I thought you knew. My hand felt cold. My throat tightened. They were taking over my house, while I sat there, quietly reading a list of things that made me inconvenient. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even move for a full minute. I simply stood up, took my handbag, wrapped a scarf around my head, and left the house. My feet walked faster than my mind. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was that if I stayed there one more second, I would break in a way I might never recover from. I reached the gate of my house and stopped. My son's car was parked outside. Her car was parked behind his. The trunk was open, filled with belongings. My belongings, things they had packed without permission. I walked inside. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The tense kind. The kind soaked in guilt. They were standing in the middle of the living room. My son froze first. His wife froze next, her hand still wrapped around a throw pillow she had stuffed into a trash bag. My curtains were on the floor. My picture frames were stacked against the wall. My rug was rolled up. My home did not look like my home. My son swallowed hard. "Mum, you're home early." I looked at him. Not with anger, but with the disappointment that sits heavy on a mother's soul. I didn't know I needed to ask permission to enter my own house. His wife's lips tightened in a nervous, irritated line. "Mum, we were just helping you," she said. "By throwing my things away?" I asked quietly. "They're old," she said. "Outdated. We just wanted to modernize your space. So when we visit, it feels comfortable." I looked around again. My home, my memories, my life, turned into trash bags. But the real pain came when my son said, "Babe didn't mean it like that, Mum. We just thought since you're always alone, you wouldn't mind." Always alone. The words hit me harder than anything. I sat down slowly. My legs felt weak. My chest felt tight. I stared at my son, my own child, and for the first time in my life I didn't recognize him. "You're always alone." He kept repeating it like it was nothing. Like loneliness was my fault. Like I should apologize for it. After a long moment I stood up. "Both of you," I said quietly, "pack your things and leave." His wife raised her eyebrows, shocked. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said. "This house is mine. You do not touch one chair in it unless I say so." My son tried to speak, but I lifted my hand. "For years I carried you, fed you, protected you. Now you walk into my house and treat me like a stranger." His eyes softened. "Mum." "No," I said. "Don't call me that right now. Because if you truly saw me as your mother, you wouldn't let anyone disrespect me in the home I built." His wife scoffed. "We didn't disrespect you. Throwing away my things is disrespect. Talking down at me is disrespect. Calling me a burden is disrespect." She stayed quiet. My son stayed quieter. I walked past them, picked up the trash bag, emptied it onto the floor, and sorted through my belongings as if reclaiming pieces of myself. Then I said the words that seemed to slice through the entire room. "I am not disposable." A long silence followed. They both realized they had crossed a line they never should have crossed. My son stepped forward. "Mum, I'm sorry. We weren't thinking." I looked at him gently but firmly. "That's the problem. You weren't thinking about me." A single tear escaped my eye, but my voice remained steady. "And now, you will understand something." They both stared. I continued. "From today I will live my life for myself. Not for you. Not for anyone. I will not shrink myself to be accepted by your wife. And I will not beg for space in a home I built with my own hands." His wife tried to interrupt. "But..." I raised my hand again. "I am done seeking approval to exist." My son lowered his eyes. His shoulders fell. For the first time he looked small. Not because he was weak, but because he finally saw the weight of what he had done. Then I pointed to the door. "Leave now." They left. Quietly. Slowly. With guilt stitched into every step. And as soon as the door closed, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because of the disrespect, but because I realized something heartbreaking. Sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for grow up to become the ones who hurt you the most. And yet, something in my spirit told me, this story is not finished. Something bigger was coming. Something none of us expected. A truth hidden behind the disrespect. A secret buried underneath the pain. Something waiting to surface. Something that would change everything. The house felt heavier after they left. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, almost breathing. I sat there on the cold floor with my belongings scattered around me, holding onto a pillow they had tried to throw away. It smelled faintly of lavender. The same lavender I used to spray on my son's blankets when he was little because it helped him sleep. Funny how scent can hold memories better than people do. I slowly picked up each item from the pile. Old birthday cards, little kitchen towels, framed pictures, a chipped mug my son made in primary school. Pieces of a life no one had the right to discard. As I arranged them back into place, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet strength, the kind that comes after heartbreak, rose slowly like dawn. But pain has a way of echoing long after the moment passes. That night I went to bed early, hoping sleep would save me from my thoughts. But around midnight my phone rang. At first I ignored it. But it rang again. And again. And by the fourth ring my heart began to race. Mothers always know when a call isn't normal. I grabbed the phone. It was my son. His name glowing on the screen made my stomach twist. I let it ring until the last second before I finally answered. His voice was shaky. "Mom, can I come over?" The words were soft, unsure, almost afraid. A part of me wanted to stay strong and say no. But the mother in me, the part that loved him beyond his mistakes, couldn't turn him away. I told him to come. It took him almost 20 minutes to arrive. I heard his slow footsteps before he even reached the door. When I opened it, he looked nothing like the confident man who had stood beside his wife earlier. His eyes were swollen, his hair messy, and his hands trembled slightly. "Mom, I need to talk to you." He came in quietly, like a child afraid of waking the house. I sat beside him on the sofa. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. For a long moment, all I heard was his breathing, unsteady, heavy. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Mom, I'm scared." My heart clenched. What happened? He ran his hands over his face and sighed deeply. "It's my marriage, Mom. It's not what you think." I didn't say a word. I simply listened. You know how she always wants everything perfect? The house, the pictures, the clothes, the family, everything. He paused. "It didn't start with you. She's like that with me too." A knot formed in my chest. She makes lists for me. Things I should say. Things I shouldn't say. Things I should wear. People I should cut off. He swallowed hard. She even deleted some of my friends' numbers without telling me. I watched him closely. The pain in his voice wasn't fake. It was the kind that grows over time, the kind a man hides to keep peace in his home. "She told me I was lucky she married me," he continued. "That she could have chosen better. And lately, I believed her." My breath caught. He shook his head again. "I shouldn't have allowed her to speak to you that way. I shouldn't have let her touch your things. I was trying to keep peace between us, but instead, I hurt you." I sighed softly. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because I didn't want to lose her," he whispered. "And I didn't want to lose you either. I've been stuck in the middle for months." He finally looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw a boy who was desperately trying to become a man in a world that didn't give him space to breathe. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry." I reached for his hand. "I forgive you." He let out a shaky breath like he had been holding it for years. But then, just as the atmosphere softened, something icy passed over his face. He hesitated before speaking again. "Mom, there's something else." My heartbeat quickened. "What is it?" He looked toward the window as if afraid someone was listening. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. "She didn't want us to tell you something. Something important. Something she hid." My skin prickled. He swallowed hard. "Mom, I didn't even know until yesterday. Until I saw it with my own eyes." "So what?" He leaned closer. "She's been using your name." I blinked. "My name? For what?" His voice trembled. "For money." My heart dropped. He nodded. "She applied for something using your details and she didn't tell me. She didn't tell anyone. And Mom, it's not small. It's not something we can ignore." My throat tightened. "What did she apply for?" He squeezed his hands together nervously. "A loan. A big one. With your information. Your age. Your address." The room spun a little. "And that's not the worst part," he added. My voice barely came out. "What's worse than that?" He exhaled, fear clouding his eyes. "She didn't use your current details. She used details from something you told me about years ago. Something no one else knows." My breath hitched. Something I told him? Something from years ago? Something deeply private? "Mom," he said quietly. "She used the information from your hospital papers." My entire body froze. That wasn't just personal information. That wasn't something anyone should have access to. Those were papers from the hardest moment in my life. A moment I barely survived. A moment only my son knew about. My son's hands shook as he continued. "She went through my old things. Found copies of your documents. Took them. And used them without telling me." I felt my chest tighten painfully. "And the loan she took?" he whispered. "She missed payments. The letters are coming. In your name." My stomach dropped. Everything suddenly made sense. Her distant looks. Her attitude. Her sudden fear when I came home earlier. Her attempt to clean the house. She wasn't cleaning. She was hiding. I sat back slowly, air leaving my lungs. My son reached for me. I didn't know, Mom. I swear. But now everything is falling apart. And I don't know what to do. For a long moment the room fell silent. Not the silence of peace. The silence of truth. The silence that comes right before a storm. I took a deep breath. Bring everything you found, I said quietly. He nodded, already rising to go. But before he reached the door, I said one more thing. You're not the only one she's been lying to. He turned sharply. I continued, my voice steady but cold. And I think the truth she's hiding is much bigger than alone. His eyes widened. Mum, what do you mean? I looked toward the doorway as if I could already feel the shadows of secrets creeping closer. Because a woman who steals someone else's identity, I said slowly, is a woman who is hiding something of her own. My son swallowed, fear deepening in his voice. What do you think she's hiding? I held his gaze. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's big. And it's coming. The next morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like the world had paused overnight, holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I barely slept, my mind replaying my son's words again and again. Alone. In my name. Using papers that were never meant to see daylight again. Papers from a chapter of my life that still bruised me when I thought about it too long. I sat at the edge of my bed, wondering how a woman who married my son, who joined my family, who smiled at me and hugged me, could do something so cold, so calculated. Trust is a fragile thing. And once broken, it doesn't crack, it shatters. Around 8 a.m. I heard a soft knock. Not frantic. Not apologetic. Just steady. I opened the door and there stood my son holding a brown envelope, thick, bent at the corners, stuffed with documents that looked too heavy for paper. He didn't speak. He simply walked in and placed the envelope on the table like he was dropping a confession. I opened it slowly. Inside were letters addressed to me. Debt notices. Missed payment warnings. Interest charges climbing like vines. And then, tucked between them, a form, application for a personal loan under my name, forged signature, my details filled in with accuracy that made my skin crawl. I stared at it for a long time. How long has she been doing this? I asked quietly. He sat down, rubbing his eyes. I think months. Maybe more. I found emails she deleted. She tried to reroute everything to a separate folder. My heart felt heavy, but not with anger, with disappointment so deep it almost felt personal. Then he pulled out another folder. This is the part one didn't know how to show you. Inside were printouts, screenshots, password changes, bank alerts, and then a single sheet that made everything inside me go still. A letter approving a second loan, even bigger than the first, taken just 2 weeks earlier. He was planning something, or she had already done it. I leaned back slowly. Where is she now? He hesitated. She left early this morning. Said she was going to see a friend. A cold feeling crept up my spine. What friend? He swallowed hard. I don't know if she even has friends. We sat in silence. The kind of silence that feels like a warning. Heavy, pressing, full of invisible eyes watching. Then suddenly his phone buzzed. A message. From her. He stared at the screen, confusion washing over his face. Mum. She said she'll be back later. And that she needs to talk to me. Urgently. I felt a slow, unsettling chill crawl up my arms. Talk about what? He shook his head. She didn't say. Something wasn't right. A woman who steals identity doesn't ask for a calm conversation. A woman who forges loan applications doesn't go for morning tea with friends. A woman who hides secrets that big doesn't come home casually. There was something she wanted to confess. Or something she wanted to control before it spilled out. My son looked at me with regret painted across his face. I think she knew you'd find out soon. I think she's panicking. Panic. Guilt. Secrets. Debt. Lies. Identity theft. The pieces were forming a picture, but the edges were still dark. Let her come, I said quietly. Let her talk. But we will both sit there. And she will not twist her story this time. He nodded, but his eyes drifted away, troubled. Hours passed. The house felt tight, like the walls were shrinking with every minute. My heart echoed in my ears, steady but heavy. My hands kept trembling no matter how tightly I folded them. Then we heard footsteps outside. Slow, hesitant, almost dragging. The door opened. And she walked in. The moment I saw her face, I knew something had shifted. Something inside her had cracked. Her eyes were swollen, her hair unkempt, her breathing uneven. She didn't look angry. She didn't look bold. She looked frightened. She didn't even greet us. She just sat down. And what she said next was not what either of us expected. "I need to explain," she whispered. My son crossed his arms. "Explain what?" "The loans. The lies. The debt collectors coming to my mum's door." She flinched. "I didn't do it to hurt her." I raised an eyebrow. "Then why did you use my name?" Her lip trembled. "Because I couldn't use mine." Something inside me froze. "What do you mean you couldn't?" She looked down at her hands, twisting them until the knuckles paled. "Because my real name isn't the one you know." My stomach dropped. She continued, voice cracking, "And the person I used to be doesn't legally exist anymore." My heart stumbled. My son blinked. "What are you talking about?" She took a deep, shaking breath. "I changed everything before I met you. My past, my family, my documents, everything. I left it all behind." "Why?" I whispered. She looked directly at me, and for the first time since I met her, I saw raw fear in her eyes. The kind of fear that doesn't come from money problems. "I was running," she said softly. "And I thought if I built a new life it would stay buried forever." My pulse quickened. "What were you running from?" I asked. She hesitated. Then she said it. "My husband." The room snapped into silence. My son stiffened. "You were married before?" She nodded, tears pooling. "Yes. And he wasn't just abusive. He was dangerous." A coldness spread through my bones. "And he found out where I was," she whispered. I felt my breath catch. She looked at my son desperately. "I took the loans because I needed money fast. I needed to disappear again before he reaches me." I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want him finding you. Or your family. I stared at her, trying to process the storm unraveling in front of me. A forged identity. A violent past. A husband hunting her. Debt taken in my name to escape him. It was too much. But she wasn't finished. She wiped her face and whispered the words that shook everything. "He knows my new name now." My heart dropped. "He also knows," she continued slowly, "that I married your son." Silence. My son stood absolutely still. And then she whispered one more sentence, the one that froze every inch of my body. "He sent me a message this morning." She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. The screen was cracked. Her hands shook as she held it out. My son leaned forward, squinting. Then he paled. I took the phone. There were only 5 words. 5 words that swallowed the air in the room. 5 words that made my hand go ice cold. "I know where you live." And below it, "I'm coming." The room went dead silent. The kind of silence that comes before something breaks. Something dark. Something dangerous. Something that will change everything we thought we knew. I slowly lowered the phone, my breath trembling. But suddenly, the loans weren't the biggest problem. Her lies weren't the biggest problem. Her identity wasn't the biggest problem. There was a man coming. A man with a past. A man with a purpose. A man who had already found her, and by extension. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "When?" She swallowed hard. "He said, hey, tonight." And in that moment, one truth filled the room like smoke. This didn't end with a loan. This didn't end with a confession. This didn't even end with her past. It was only beginning.